One of my favourite Old Testament prophets is a guy called Micaiah. He was this Old Testament prophet that stood alone against 400 false prophets, and he only told the truth to King Ahab, even when it was a bad idea. And he even had messengers come and tell him to change his prophecies. He predicted Ahab's death and Israel's defeat in battle, and he was thrown in prison for it, and he never changed his mind. His name actually means he who is like Yahweh. Yahweh being the tetragrammaton, the Yud He Vod He, the four letters the Jews wouldn't say, even when his most powerful, fervent servant failed and was spent. His plan isn't contingent on one person. I often wonder if God could find all these qualities in one person, he wouldn't need Elijah, Elisha and Micaiah. It would just be one person. What I like about Micaiah is his instantaneous courage. It was a different characteristic to Elijah and Elisha, and a different way he used him. It's easy to look at the highlight reels of these biblical figures and assume instant divine power. But for many, including Elisha, there was a quiet, unseen decade of learning, serving, and trusting God's process. If you feel called, but find yourself in a season of waiting, serving, or learning, remember Elisha, your decade is not a delay of destiny, but part of its deliberate unfolding. God is preparing the way for you. A few people that come to mind who had a delay and a wait, starting with Jesus. Jesus had to wait 3 days for his resurrection. Noah waited 120 years for the rain, and in that time no one believed him. Abraham waited 25 years for the son he was promised. Joseph waited 14 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. If God makes you wait, trust him. If he delays your plans, seek him. Waiting isn't wasted. What it does is it refines you, it humbles you, strengthens you, and it prepares you for what's ahead. The stories of the Old Testament prophets often feel like lightning strikes, sudden, dramatic, but it's often not how God works. We see Elijah calling down fire, Elisha parting the Jordan, and Micaiah boldly confronting a king. But behind these powerful moments lie a story of patience, preparation, and profound waiting. Elijah is a great example of a prophet operating in divine power. From challenging the prophets of Baal to Mount Carmel to outrunning chariots, which is cool. His ministry was marked by dramatic confrontations and undeniable, amazing miracles. Yet even this mighty man, after all that, after all those God moments, he came to a place of profound despair. Fear drove him into the wilderness, where he famously longed for death. It was in this moment of vulnerability, not in fire or earthquake, but in gentle whisper, that God reaffirmed his presence and was to anoint Elisha as his successor to do the job he couldn't do. Imagine it, a wealthy farmer diligently ploughing fields, getting on with life. Then this guy walks up, Elijah walks up, and he throws a cloak around him. Elisha's response is immediate. Something in his spirit came alive, and he didn't think twice about getting rid of all his earthly goods. Just like Peter and the other fishermen, they were quick to get rid of their boats, their nets, and answer the call. And then he followed Elijah. Sorry, out of breath. Whew. This, I think, is a picture of unwavering commitment. He left everything to become Elijah's servant. Sometimes God will ask us to do that. Sometimes he'll just test our heart. He might not want us to give up everything. He'll ask, are you willing? All these blessings, the house, the car, all of it, would you give it up for me immediately to fulfill the calling? He left everything to become Elijah's servant. What often gets overlooked is the duration of this discipleship. The narrative suggests a significant period, like I said, I think about 10 years, a decade passed between Elisha's call and the grand miracles he did for God. He was serving in that time. He was observing. He was allowing God to minister and prepare him. He was internalizing the spiritual yearnings and rhythms and the prophetic insights of his mentor, of the guy that was teaching him all this stuff. He was being refined in fire, prepared and molded for that double portion. Let's go up this way. This decade of waiting teaches us a powerful truth. God's call often precedes a season of preparation. The time between the promise and the fulfillment is not wasted time. It's a training ground. It's where character is forged, faith is deepened, and the skills and spiritual authority that are needed for the next season, that's where they're cultivated. Breather. Micaiah's story is a reminder that sometimes God's call demands immediate courage and often unpopular action. When King Ahab of Israel and King Jehoshaphat, when they sought prophetic counsel from these prophets before the battles they were going into, 400 of his prophets would give him a positive outlook, but the one who is like Yahweh knew different. Jehoshaphat sensed something was wrong with these 400 prophecies. He asked a man with a different spirit. He knew something in his spirit knew it was off. And then here comes Micaiah. He was known for never prophesying anything good about Ahab. Micaiah was actually sarcastic to the king. He didn't care, did he? He was just going by whatever God told him to say. But when pressed, he gave the truth. Israel would be defeated and the king would die. And despite being struck and hit and beaten and imprisoned, made fun of, all his friends would have left him, family would have pleaded, he decided to stick with what God told him. And I'm sure he would have been all alone. His immediate call was to speak God's unpopular truth, regardless of the personal cost. And back to Elijah. I know I'm flicking between these guys, but these prophets are super cool. Elijah is one of the most powerful and recognizable Old Testament prophetic figures. He called down fire from heaven, defeated 450 prophets of Baal. And look at this story, look at the way it ends. The story of Elijah and his replacement Elisha reveals an interesting dynamic, I think. When his appointed person is unwilling to carry out the mission, God has a plan B. And his plan B was Elisha. And sometimes the consequence is having to promote your own replacement. Elisha, upon receiving Elijah's mantle, later struck the ground only 3 times during a prophetic instruction. And he was chastised for his lack of faith. It's possible that Elisha was learning from his mentor's primary mistakes. Elisha's issue wasn't lack of power. Should we sit down by here? It was a lack of faith. He had faith that God could protect him, but not would. Could protect him from the prophets of Baal, but not from the emotional and political fallout which came from Jezebel, the spirit of Jezebel. I often think he failed towards the end because he didn't learn to recognize when he was tired and he needed rest. There's something to be said about planning in rest periods, especially after ministry. We have a limited, finite level of patience and energy and strength, and we need to know when we're tired. Another interesting thought, I think, is this contrasts sharply with the New Testament apostles who Jesus actually called his extension, not replacement. The shift is from a model where a prophet is replaced when they fail, to one where the entire church is commissioned to extend God's work, not to be a replacement when we mess up, but to extend it. And those are a few of my thoughts about Elijah, Elisha, and Micaiah. Oh, steep hill. But so pretty. Whoosh.